Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Moshe. This is Moshe Norman out of Lakewood, New Jersey. Tonight is June 30th of 2025. The summer has come and it's nice and good and hot here in our neck of the woods and presumably in Baltimore, Maryland as well. Shlomo?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So tonight we have the
Awesome.
honor of hosting Shlomo Slatkin, who's a licensed clinical professional counselor, also known as an LCPC or LPC, or I think there's some other term for it in New York, from Baltimore. And Shlomo's expertise is in Imago Therapy. Shlomo's actually a second time presenter here on Mondays with Maishi. And the reason I had him back was because I actually reviewed our last conversation, and I found it to be fantastically informative, really, really interesting. I found you to be very clear, very conceptual, very calm, and very easy to understand. And you really covered much of the topic. But I do feel like there were some aspects, some details, some aspects that you left sort of mysterious. And I don't want to let you get away with that because we want to be able to really get a good grip of what imago therapy is. We got so caught up on dynamics and relationships and how to work them and what they mean that we didn't actually get enough, as far as I feel, we didn't get enough into the practice of imago therapy. So forgive me for manipulating you and swooping you back in here for another show. But thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Shlomo, just tell us. I know there's like a little bit of a love story behind imago therapy in your world. If you don't mind the short version, just sharing it with those of us who haven't heard it yet, please.
Sure. Like many of my colleagues, I don't know, I found in Imago, a lot of people have that practice Imago. Also, it's like they used to have this commercial for with the hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm also a member. And that a lot of us in Imago therapy, the trainers and the therapists have experienced it and have come to love it ourselves. And that's because it's personal. We've experienced the power of it. So my first, I guess, foray into Imago therapy was when I was newly married. I was in school getting my master's in counseling psychology. I was also wanted to be a pulpit rabbi at the time, and it was about 2 years into our marriage. We had our first child, and things were getting to be a challenge. So we thought that when we got engaged, we thought we would never fight. People would tell us at Shabbat, "Oh, marriage is difficult." No, we're great. We know how to communicate. We know how to communicate about things that are difficult, maybe that are bothering each other. But when we start having conflict with each other, that was not something that we were expecting and not something that we knew how to deal with. So it was very scary for us. And both my wife and myself were recommended to go to Imago. Her Sheitel Macher told her, and I had a colleague that told me. And we had a specific
That's where it
referral.
all happens, by the way.
That's how it happens, right?
If that's where it all happens at the
Yeah,
show.
they know
Right.
they know everyone's business, right? So Baruch Hashem, we went to the Imago therapist, and after an hour and a half, you know, our marriage had changed, and it didn't mean permanently. We still needed to go. We went regularly for quite a bit of time, but what it did for us is it helped us understand what was going on. It helped us make sense of the fact that things were not going the way we thought they were. It helped us give hope for the future and helps us see. Really, I'd say for me, it really struck a chord because I saw the hashgacha pratis in the relationship, that dafka in the conflict that we had was it was not coincidental. It was really the very things that we both needed to work and heal, to grow and heal from our childhood experiences. And that further gave us the hope that we were in the right relationship as opposed to looking at our challenges as a liability and a reason to call it quits. And so we used it over the years. I mean, I decided to get trained, and that became my full-time advocate vocation, working with couples and doing this for over 20 years, and now training other therapists to do the same thing. So I really believe in it, and I think just as I think this is important for any of us clinicians to, whether you're working with couples or individuals, to really go through the process yourself, to really be able to hold the hope for the client, because a client's coming in, a couple's coming in, and the last thing they have is hope, especially for couples. And to be able to believe in them, to know that they can do it because we've done it ourselves, it's very powerful. So as you can tell, or we'll be
That's
able
great.
to tell, I'm
And
very
you
passionate
know,
about this work.
one of the things I love is if you go on Shlomo's website, I don't remember what the website is, if it's Shlomo Slatkin or something, it's
The marriage restoration project.com.
marriagerestorationproject.com. You can see a beautiful picture of his entire family together. It's like no secret. It's all out there, up in there, and you can see the beauty of what's become of that 20 whatever year old story. So worth taking a peek. And I'm fascinated that you chose to do that on the website. But I guess it makes it very real and poignant for those looking for help.
My wife's the marketing person, so I give her the credit for that.
I hope they're not
I
AI.
don't like to share too much publicly if I don't have to,
I
but
hope they're not AI kids.
no, they're not kids.
Okay.
But that's part of it. It's I think people do appreciate
Yeah.
that it's real and that real people go through challenges and real people can come through them.
You use the word communication, and I feel like the word communication is such a tricky word because it has different meanings to different people. Like communication, people consider um, a lack of communication when two people aren't talking, but when they're yelling at each other, they may consider that communicating. And I think we therapists use the term communication in a much more refined and complex way, that it's getting the message across in the most effective way and being able to bounce back and forth, ping pong messages back and forth in a way that's most effective, least offensive, and things like that. My understanding is that Imago focuses a lot on that communication, the utilization of effective and proper communication.
Yeah, I mean it does because it's something that some people, I think, I don't want to say Imago has maybe a name that, oh, it's just people think of it as a communication technique because the Imago dialogue is the main therapeutic intervention. So it is true that we are focusing a lot on helping the couple communicate, but it's not just teaching communication technique. Communication is it's the way we cannot not communicate. So we have to interact, whether it's verbal or nonverbals. That's how we express ourselves to another through communication. But it's more about how we do it than the actual tools, meaning it's the communication is a means towards an end. It's a vehicle for transformation to be able to help the couple feel safe and connected. So it's more than just like saying, okay, like this is how you're supposed to talk, do this, do that. It's setting the stage for an encounter of the couple where they can truly connect in a meaningful way and, co-regulate each other's brains and feel
Mhm.
safe.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that soon, about the necessity of regulation. I mean, one of the things I think that we face a lot in couples counseling is when at least one of the parties becomes very dysregulated and starts to sort of take up all the energy in the room and things like that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that soon. I want to know if we could take a step back for a couple
Sure.
minutes. Let's just talk about the word imago. What in heaven's name does that mean? And how did it become a form of therapy? If we talk about a person in your past being you're taking in their imago. What does this all mean?
Okay, sure. The word imago means image in Latin. And the theory is that we all have an unconscious image of our ideal partner. Meaning, why do we choose? And this might be a little bit more complicated in our circles because depending on how people meet and get to know each other, but they're talking about kind of just the regular Western idea of romantic love. We are attracted to somebody that unconsciously reminds us of this ideal image. And this ideal image is a composite of the positive and negative characteristics of our parents. So that we are looking to marry someone very familiar. And that explains we meet thousands of people. Why is this person the one that I gravitate towards, that I feel a pull towards? Because there's something there that's very familiar, and there's something there that's waiting to get healed. And that explains kind of why we do that. The question is though, why would you want to attract the negative in someone? People like, I understand the positive, but why would I want to recreate my childhood if I had a bad childhood?
Mhm.
And the idea is that no one consciously is looking for that. It's totally
If you would
subconscious.
ask them, they would say that's what they don't want, and
It's
then
the
they'll
opposite.
choose it anyway.
They'll choose it anyway. It's like, people say like, oh no, why does someone just why how come this woman keeps choosing like going after abusive men?
Mhm.
They're not consciously looking for that, but
Mhm.
it's an opportunity for them to, or anyone in any situation that's familiar, we're looking for the same thing to be able to grow and heal. And this is why, you know, discarding a relationship prematurely and not really working on it doesn't necessarily help a person, because if, according to the theory, we're going to be attracting this prototype no matter what, this avatar, whatever you want to call it. So if we don't get it right this time, we're going to find somebody else the second time very similar, unless we get
And,
conscious.
and more so, if we don't heal that part of ourselves, we're never going to feel the full satisfaction of finding our full selves. We're only going to find that if we, tackle it and face it head on and address it.
Right. So doing the work, even though it can be painful, is really what's going to be able to help us heal from that childhood.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, amazing. Now, this has been, contested forever. The idea that we choose somebody who we're familiar with. Why would I want it? Um, uh, how do I even know? There's no way for me to know. Everybody acts on, at their best behavior, especially in our circles where we date for a short period of time and don't really intimately get to know the person that we're dating. So they say, no, it's impossible that I could have seen those signs or seen those things during dating. What do you say to that?
So in the date, so Imago explains three stages of relationship. The first is what we call the romantic stage. The romantic stage is basically we're kind of on drugs in a sense. Our brain is flooded with neurochemicals that dulls all of the pain receptors. So we're not able to see what's really going on. We're not able to see the red flags. And actually sometimes we may see them, but we don't want to see them. So you can ask a couple, if you would have known now, if you could think back on, when you first met your wife or your husband, that this would be an issue, could you have foreseen it? And if you really think about it, a lot of people say, actually, yes, I kind of knew this was an issue, but I was too blind to really want to look at it. I didn't want to look at it. So I overlooked that. And that's what happens in that romantic stage, that euphoria that we have. But once a couple commits and we reach what we call the power struggle, the chemicals wear off. We start realizing that our spouse is not necessarily everything we thought they were. There's a lot of feeling of, you know, just shock, dismay, second guessing. And that's where couples are going to be coming into your office, that they're not agreeing, they don't see things the same way. They're questioning whether they made the right decision. Sometimes they want to leave.
Mhm.
And 50% of couples get divorced, at least in the general population, though unfortunately there's a lot more divorces from community than it has in the past. And then you have the other people that are living, let's say, invisible divorce. They're more like roommates instead of soulmates. And the goal of the therapy is to really help us become conscious. What's going on in this power struggle? Why is it bothering me? Instead of pointing fingers at, you did this, you did that, it's your fault. Learning about why it bothers me, having our spouse understand, and creating what we call the conscious relationship, the conscious marriage. And when we can become conscious, we start realizing, as I mentioned kind of in that first session that my wife and I had, that there's a reason why we're fighting about this issue. This is very familiar to me. This reminds me of my childhood. And when I come to that realization, I can be able to have more of conscious choice to have how I'm going to react to my spouse. Because basically what's happening in a relationship, because your spouse is triggering that childhood trauma or childhood experience, again, it doesn't have to be a major trauma, but the childhood wound, the childhood hurt, your brain is going to go back to a very primitive protective place where you're going to be self-absorbed, you're going to be focused on survival. You're not going to be able to see the situation how it actually is. You're just going to feel like you're in danger. And you're going to be focused on surviving and no room for problem solving, negotiating, compromising. It's just, I need to stay alive and I'm going to do whatever I can. And even if
Okay.
that is to the detriment of the relationship.
And I think we'd be remiss if we don't point out that then those become patterns. Once you get into a cycle of offense, defense, defense, offense, these just become reenacted patterns, and presumably they're reenacted from older patterns in the way they were to begin with. So someone who was always defensive, or felt threatened is going to feel that way in their spousal relationship, in their marital relationship, when something, doesn't go well or doesn't go perfectly. They're going to then act or behave or react really in a way that's familiar to them, and that's going to, elicit some kind of reaction from the other person, and then it's just becomes a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, it's usually actually like one spouse's adaptation to protect how they protect themselves growing up is actually going to provoke the opposite of what they want. So one person's, we say, is a minimizer and a maximizer.
Mhm.
One person's going to minimize their energy and shut down, withdraw, freeze, or submit, and that's going to make that maximizer feel invisible. And when someone feels invisible, they need to be seen, so they make more noise, and that just makes the minimizer feel more scared and pull away more. So it's a dance that we keep perpetuating this cycle
Yeah,
here.
and we see this all the time when a spouse complains to the other spouse, and us outsiders can say, "Oh, if they would be able to hold that, if they would be able to validate that, their spouse would calm down." And what they do instead is they try to explain, not even necessarily to justify their position so much, but to explain their position. This is why I did it. But the other spouse is not really asking, in the process, the other spouse is asking to be heard, not for them to explain. So here I am trying to explain it to you so that you don't stay as angry at me as you are, right? And I'm actually causing you to become more angry and more frustrated in that I'm not listening to you.
Right. So that's why it's so crucial to stop what's going on and find a different way of interacting where
Exactly.
both people can feel heard and both people can feel safe.
Yeah. So I want to ask you more about that. I want to just comment on something earlier. You're talking about people struggle with this concept that they marry what's familiar to them so that they could heal. What do you mean so that they could heal? And I like to say I had a client once who kept complaining that he married his mother. He was very miserable in his marriage, and he kept saying he married his mother. It's his mother, and he can't believe he did it. And why did he marry someone just like his mother? And then at one point I said, "Why do you think you did marry someone just like your mother?" And he answered me something very profound. The way he put it, and I thought that this sort of is a good illustration of what people do. He said, "I guess I wanted to see if I could marry someone like my mother, and she'll still love me. If I could marry that person and I know that she loves me, then I know my mother really loves me."
Mhm.
And I found that to be very profound. In other words, he's looking for his mother's love. He can't know that he has it until a woman who's abusive to him in the way his mother was abusive to him will actually accept him and love him. That's called healing.
Yeah. So that's to be able to be in that same kind of laboratory condition and have a different response.
Mhm,
That's what's going to, like that situation with your client, that's what's
mhm.
going to be able to really truly help him heal. As opposed to just finding someone who's just really loving and the opposite of his mother and then Shlomo Yisrael, like
It'll just
that's
get
not as
boring for
powerful.
him. It
Yeah,
doesn't do it doesn't do that much for him.
yeah.
Right. Um, you also mentioned before about people in their relationships, and that they need to face the challenges that I guess what we would call in our language, a transference of the marital relationship brings, and transcend them, or face them and tackle those issues. I recently had a marriageable age woman in my office, and she came in to speak about family matters, and I asked her if she feels ready to get married, and she said no. And then we continued to talk, and then she said that I asked her if she's in therapy, and she said, "Well, I had seen a therapist, and it didn't feel right to me. And then I saw another therapist, and she didn't feel right to me either. This one was too quiet, this one was a little too that, and I'm a little bit of a perfectionist." And I looked at her square in the eye, and I said, "You're telling me that you can't be in a relationship you don't feel ready to be in a relationship with a man. And you've gone through a couple of therapists who just weren't good enough for you because you're a perfectionist. I think that what might be helpful for you is to actually be in those relationships with those therapists who are not adequate for you and figure that out and, learn how to work that, because that might be the key ingredient here to what you need in being in a relationship, to address, communicate, discuss what it is that's not working for you in the relationship." And she found it to be helpful. Yeah, that was kind of unsolicited advice. Okay. I want to ask everybody for those of you who could turn on your videos, please. We love to see faces and we appreciate those who do and those who have the videos on. Please, we invite you to turn on your videos and we invite questions by using the React tab on the bottom of your screen. Click the React tab and raise your hand, and we're happy to take your question and comments. Okay. So we got the idea of the Imago and that people marry those who will actually be helpful, I guess in our language we would say in creating shlemos for them if they could work that through, right? And really developing the person's self. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on that just yet? No? Okay. I want to go a little bit into Imago, and I know that you have a video demo that you were going to show. So would this be the right time to do that?
Did you want to see the Harville's demo of the more difficult situation or the appreciations dialogue?
Well, we can do both.
You do both. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm going to give you the ability to share, and you just you can share and just make sure to share the sound as well.
Okay. So the first video will show a video of so Dr. Harville Hendricks. He's the one who founded and created Imago Therapy. And this is a little snippet from him on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Oh gosh, there's so much here. Let me share sound. And just illustrating some of the connection between the childhood and what's going on in the relationship.
So you know who's been the greatest teacher for me about validation, about the common thread in the human experience, about what we're all looking for, is Harville Hendricks, who was our first real guest expert on the show in the 80s. And he developed a theory called Imago Therapy, where you literally mirror back to the person what they're saying so that the person knows that they were heard, they know that they were seen, and ultimately know that they matter. The Imago theory is that you end up imaging in your relationship that which you most need to heal from the past with your parents or whoever was the prominent guiding force in your personal development as a child. When you understand that, you then begin to know that whatever is going on that comes up over and over and over again in your relationship isn't about what is happening in that moment, but it's about the past, and they're trying to heal that from their past. In 2006, Louis wrote to the Oprah Show desperately searching for help. Louis admitted to verbally, emotionally, and sometimes physically abusing his wife. In a private Imago Therapy session with Dr. Harville Hendricks, Louis was asked to speak to his wife as though he was talking to his abusers, taking Louis back to the source of his pain.
What is it like living with us?
You tell me all the time to stand up for myself, and then you beat me with an extension cord till I can't move for days and days.
So living with us is like being in hell. Never feeling loved, never feeling wanted, never feeling taken care of.
Is there more?
It's not fair that you take away my childhood and take out everything that you've done wrong in your life on us.
Tell her how you feel about that. I hate that.
I hate you.
Yeah.
The only thing that you've ever cared about is yourself. You had kids because you thought they would make you happy, not because you wanted to take care of them or because you cared about them.
And how that impacted me, how that's impacting me.
And how that's impacting me is that it's constant neglect. I'm really hurting, and I feel disappointed.
And I'm learning from you how to hurt people.
The whole point of Imago Therapy is to see how the relationship you had with your parents, the feelings, again, the use of the word energy, the energy exchange, whether that was good or bad or indifferent with your parents, how that impacted you in such a way that you have carried that energy into your future. So even though you say, I'm gonna grow up and I'm not gonna be like them, I'm not gonna do that, that is not gonna happen to me, energetically, that's what you know how to do.
Okay, so that was an example of what we call part of the parent-child dialogue. It's something that we do with couples. And he was having a dialogue with his. There's a lot more we can say about that, but he's having a dialogue with his parent, and but you can see that obviously it was impacting him because some of the things that he grew up seeing and experiencing translated into his relationship.
Who was sitting next to him? Was that his wife?
That was his wife, yeah.
And how did they get her into a place where she was playing the role of his parent?
So normally, I guess they just show like a really small
Role
clip
play.
of it. I don't know what the whole,
Mhm.
if they ever show the whole thing, but basically we would introduce that to the couple that we're going to do. I would teach them we're doing something called the parent-child dialogue. It's an opportunity for you to have a conversation with your parent. I'm going to have you be mom, and then and Louis, I want you to be, think about how old you are, go back, take a moment, you can help center them to get back to that place. And then I would coach her to share, I'm your mom, what's it like living with me? And then he would say, living with you, mom, is such and such. He would explain. And then I would coach, a series of questions like, I'm your mom, what is your deepest hurt with me? And then help her just be able to ask the questions, and she's just mirroring back. She's repeating back. She's not interjecting. Obviously, there's nothing to defend because it's not about her. And it really is. It's a very powerful exercise because this is really an eye opener when people are able to see that the same things that that my spouse is complaining to me about are the things they're telling me right now as I'm playing the parent role. And I start to realize the projection that I understand. Oh, that's why you complain to me about this all the time, because this is what happened with mom or dad, and vice versa for the child when they're looking at their spouse, but they're talking to their parent, and they realize that they're saying the same things. It helps remove that projection, helps them see what's really going on. So it helps elicit more compassion. It helps elicit more uh, self-understanding, and when we do this in the beginning of our couples workshop or our group workshop, and that's when people really start to get this process. They really start to believe it and feel it, that it's true to them because they see the strong parallels. So as one woman said, I was superimposing my mother's head on my husband, and like that's what I feel like we're doing all these years.
Fascinating. Okay, let's take a question from Sippy.
Hi, thank you so much.
Sure.
I'm hearing a lot about the couples and about how people marry about like related to their past or about their parents and stuff. And I'm wondering if this modality specifically would also be helpful for people who are dating, where they're dating and their patterns of the people they're dating are matching whatever traumas or whatever past experience they've had, whether it's with their parents or other things. Would this be helpful for somebody who's in that stage as well, or is this something specifically past that stage after when they're already married and already in it?
Yeah, so this is very helpful for dating couples. There is a book called Keeping the Love You Find. It's a book for individuals. And there's even a workshop. And it's funny, I did a group. I one time spoke at a Shabbaton with singles, like really, really long time ago. And they said these are difficult guys. They've been dating for a long time. They're not, they, something's wrong with them. I don't know what. We did a little workshop, and then I think within the next number of months, most of them wound up getting engaged, and they were dating for quite a while. There's something about this information just to be aware of what was going on and what they were looking for, as well as also the skills of how to be in a relationship, how to be able to listen to somebody, how to be able to be curious about another person, how to be able to go deeper, have a deeper conversation, which can lead to a chance to really see the person in a deeper way and have a deeper connection. So it's very helpful. It's very helpful people removing their blocks, seeing their patterns, seeing what they're doing to get in their own way, seeing some of their fears. So yeah, I found it to be extremely helpful for singles, and especially singles that are
Okay,
struggling.
were you suggesting to have the dating couple meet for a session?
No, no, and not even that there is another potential person there.
just like to learn more about yourself
Right,
and what you're
because
looking
like
for. Yeah.
there's a, let's say they are dating and they're going through person after person and everything is either working and not working, um, but they're connecting more with, I would say, like the baggage of the other person. Like they're looking for the traumas and that's what they want.
Meaning subconsciously they're looking for some type
They're
of,
connecting to the
yeah.
negative parts, right?
Yeah. And like I wouldn't say like now that you know this, like I know my childhood baggage, so I'm gonna look for somebody who is gonna wound me in this way. It doesn't work that way so much. But it's I think also just getting a reality check that even just knowing that there's a power struggle. I think a lot of people are afraid. They want to find the perfect person and that they have no baggage. And what they don't understand is that there's going to be challenges no matter who you marry. And even if you think you found the right person, you're still going to have problems with them. So, focusing on what's really important, that's just, one aspect that I think this process can helps you be able to like show up and really be present with someone and not get kind of caught up in your head to try to find the perfect spouse.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Um, I, I, I want to put out something, that's been on my mind about this concept of marrying somebody who is going to hit on your deficits. Because again, this gets contested a lot, and I think now sometimes I wonder if uh, in every person that we date, they're going to touch on something in some way that's going to be one of our deficits or wound us in some way. Pretty much, I think. And so if it's not problem A, it will be problem B. And so sometimes I wonder, if the person that we choose, if we may have chosen someone else, but then we would just reenact with them a different struggle from childhood. What do you think about that?
Well, in theory, I think that we're going to recreate it no matter what, which I can so that we're going to either pick somebody who has that particular issue, we're going to project they have it or provoke it because it's about us. It's like we have this agenda, we have this childhood experience that we have, and it's really about our perception. It's not even about that our parents were good or bad, but it's our perception of how relationship was for us growing up, whether it's objectively or correct. We take that, it's kind of etched in our brains. It's kind of like a software program in our brain, operating system, and we're looking for something that somebody is going to help us deal with that.
Mhm.
So we're going to recreate it no matter what. So it doesn't really matter who it is. Like, and that's why even people who do not have a romantic stage, like for example, let's say somebody has a basho, and they met each other, let's say one time for a few hours, and they didn't have a chance. Okay, they weren't they maybe they felt something there, but it wasn't like they didn't really get to know them so well as somebody who went out with somebody, like say for a few months. I have seen when couples do the Imago workup, I'll explain what that is. They start to see that the very issues they're very similar. So
Mhm.
even though I didn't even fall in love with this person, as we would say, but I wound up marrying my parents because we're going to either hashgacha pratis is going to happen, and we're going to like recreate the situation. So I'll just give you like an example of how it works. A lot of times we do this exercise called the Imago workup, and basically you write down a series of things about your childhood, the positive and negative characteristics of your parents, what you wanted and needed most as a child and didn't get, childhood memories, positive memories, childhood frustrations, the emotions associated with that, and then finally this minimizer maximizer dynamic, like how you respond to conflict and what you need that you're not getting. And basically it becomes like a Mad Lib. Basically there's a story on the last page and you have to copy and paste information from the childhood. The story is about the present, has nothing to do with the childhood, but the information is called from the childhood. And it reads like, I tend to be drawn towards somebody who I sometimes experience as A, which is the negative traits. I always want them to be the positive traits so that I can get C, my whatever that unmet childhood needs. When I get what I want, I feel this way. When I don't get I want this way, I feel I react when I don't get what I want, I react to either a minimizer or a maximizer to hide my fear that you will, abandon me or not love me or smother me, whatever it is. And people read it and it's just like, I cannot believe this. This is my marriage.
Mhm.
But the information has nothing to do with your marriage. So the point is that people see that as much as you want to say, like maybe it's not true, but people see it, and I would say 99% of the time they
That
read
they're
that
just
lines up.
recreating the old story with the next person.
Exactly. And that means that
And this is similar to what we do in therapy. I mean, right? That's transference in therapy. We reenact how the way we experience the therapist is how we reenact our relationship, right?
yeah. So
Fascinating.
it's
Okay. Tell me some other what are some of the other workings of the Imago therapy process?
so the main process is what we call the Imago dialogue. There's a basic dialogue that we help us deal with frustrations, but there's also very other types of dialogues. There's like an appreciations dialogue, which we could show if we want to see a demonstration of that. There's a relationship vision dialogue where you get to talk about the vision for your relationship. So there's and the point of the dialogue is really it's a structured process where one person shares, the other person mirrors back, they repeat back what the other says. They do not interject. They do not rebut. They do not offer their advice. Their whole job is to cross the world and cross the bridge into the world of the other and to be fully present in the other person's space. And what that does, more important than the actual content, is the process. Because what it does is it creates safety. And what the safety does is it helps heal the childhood. So regardless of what you're talking about, that safe encounter where we can experience each other in a safe way is what heals and helps us regulate the brain. Because the challenge we have in relationships is the anxious brain. And Harville Hendricks talks a lot about this. There's I don't know if you're familiar with the still face experiment. The still face experiment is basically they have a baby, and the mother comes in, and the mother is like playing with the baby, and the baby is laughing and looking all happy, and then the mother turns away, and she reappears with a still face, kind of blank stare, and the baby's like, "What's going on here?" So the baby's, you know, trying to
Try.
make a lot of noise, like, and then the baby just gets deflated because they're just like collapses, like deflated because they're not being noticed. And this is what I mentioned before, this kind of minimizer and maximizer energy that when we don't feel safe and we don't feel that our parent is attuned to us, and that could be either that non-attuned parenting is what creates the child's anxiety, meaning the child is born joyfully alive. The child wants to play, the child wants to interact. But when the parent is not able to really fully be there for the child and attune to the child is either going to minimize their energy or maximize their energy. Sometimes you'll have a parent that's overbearing, and then other times you'll have a parent that is kind of non-attentive and not really there, and that will create either one of those adaptations. So for them and for the relationship or being in relationship with another is an is an anxious experience, and that's going to appear in other relationships, and of course in our primary, the marital relationship, because it's so familiar and it's the closest relationship we can have with another human being. And that anxiety is what's going to make it difficult for us and to have us react. So learning how to co-regulate our brains to actually be in a relationship and feel that this person can be attuned to me, they can be present, they can be safe for me, that itself is really the healing.
And it must also be an exercise to be able to hear the other person without jumping on the compulsion to explain, justify, minimize, or anything like that. Just to be able to be present enough to be in our experience must be, again, just a emotional forced regulation exercise.
Yeah, it forces a person to regulate, and it helps them really. Again, it's coming from a place of curiosity as
Mhm.
opposed to judgment. And when I can be curious, I can experience the other.
But does everybody have the capacity to do this? Or does this sometimes have to be developed for a long time in the therapy?
Some people are going to be, I'll say, better at it than others, or more motivated to do it, more open to do it than others. For some people, it's going to be more of a challenge.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like we might think we have a timetable of like, I know this works, so like let's go, like it should only take a certain number of sessions. But what we learn is just really to be there with the couple. Even if it's taking a really long time, if they're coming back and they're getting benefit from it and they're feeling safer, even if it's not the way that we would like them to do it, that's the most important thing, and it does make a difference.
Shlomo, I mean, wouldn't it be fair to say that knowing people the way we therapists know them, that anyone who talks wants to be heard? Okay, I think the reason that we talk is because we're looking to be heard. Otherwise, we just wouldn't say it, right? And isn't it fear in all navigation of relationships that the first tenet of the relationship is to know that the other person is hearing you. So isn't validation a basic tenet? Listening, reflection, validation, a basic tenet. That's not necessarily exclusive to Imago therapy, but to all communication if we want to have a safe, healthy relationship.
I mean, yeah, I think that it's a basic. I mean, again, I can't speak as authoritatively about other modalities, but for sure, I mean, I think that it's definitely a basic human need, and I would think it would be something that would be important. I don't know how much it's focused on in
Mhm.
other therapies, meaning I think there's a lot of focus on, it might be part of it, but I think there might be more focus on problem solving as opposed to, and the content as opposed to the process. It concerns me more about how they're interacting than if we figured out the issue, because they're not going to be in therapy forever, and they're going to have issues in content for the rest of their life together. So it's more important for me that they change the way that they interact with each other. That's what's going to be more healing than the content. So I don't know if other therapies, even though they maybe acknowledge that it's important to listen and to validate and that it's a human need, how much that's really the focus.
Shlomo, I wonder often about family therapy because I do family therapy often. Is this a strategy that you can apply to non-spouses but families?
Sure. Are you referring specifically to
Family
like more
work.
than two people, or like even just like
Yes.
an adult child and a
Let's say more than two people.
yeah, for sure. This is a basic this is a basic human need to be able to feel safe and to be able to interact and really show up and be present for another person. So I mean, I've done this with businesses, I've done this with families. I mean, it works in all because it's, again, it's a very fundamental human need. So I
Right.
think that for sure, it definitely works. It definitely helps people feel heard and really understand each other, sometimes for the first time ever, and creates a
Yeah.
breakthrough.
So tell us more about some of the steps in imago therapy because this obviously is global.
So, part of the steps in the dialogue is the first step is it's called the original name was called the intentional dialogue. And the idea is that intentional means that this has to be an intentional conversation, which means our typical conversation at home is I'm upset about something, I'm just going to dump and tell you exactly what I'm feeling. Well, that's not going to be effective most of the time. So the first step in dialogue, in any dialogue, is to make an appointment and to see if the other person's available. And that's a little bit redundant. They made an appointment to be in your office. Why do they need to make an appointment to have a dialogue? But we want to train our brain to be more intentional because when you leave this office, I want you to be able to go home and to realize that all because something's bothering me doesn't mean that you're available to hear. So it helps us kind of get out of ourselves and really acknowledge that there's someone else in the relationship besides us. So making the appointment, seeing if now is a good time, and usually it is if they're there. And that allows the person who's listening to know that they might be hearing something that might not be easy to hear, but I need to shift from kind of reactive mode and to also be intentional and to listen intentionally. That's the first step. The second step is the person shares, and there's what we call the sender, and then there's the receiver. The sender is the one who shares. The receiver is the one who's going to mirror back. And what they're going to do is they're going to repeat back as close to verbatim as possible what the sender shared. They said without interjecting, without correcting, without rebutting. And they will ask, did I get you? Meaning, did I understand what you're saying? Was that, basically, was it accurate? If not, or if there's a part they didn't repeat back, they would say, You got some of it, you got a lot of it. The part I'd like you to get is also this part. And then we'll ask, is there more? Because a lot of times people don't feel safe to open up and share. And what this does is it shows, I'm curious. I really want to hear what you have to say, even if you don't necessarily want to. But you want to show that you want to open that up. And it's a very slow process, but it if you can do it very fast, but when you slow it down, it allows the person to take a moment. And I find inevitably, if you give a person that pause, is there more? Actually, yes, there is more. And they often come up with the most profound insights. I remember one client, she was always like, she's like, Rabbi, like every time you always ask me that question, I always come up with something really profound when you ask me that. And I wouldn't have said it if you didn't give me a chance to do that. So it's so powerful, even
It
just
sounds like you're opening up more safety. But
yeah,
in other words, I've concluded, and you're still asking me if there's more, meaning you're giving even deeper permission. You're showing that you're still interested and you're
right.
more interested.
And I'm here until you're done. Like I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm present with you.
Mhm.
And that process continues. And now some of the things that we do, like obviously, and when we're learning this, and in the clinical training, and we learn how to deepen it. We learn how to give, let's say, lead lines, sentence stems, and when you do this, and what hurts me most about this, or how I react when this happens, or what I feel in my body when this happens, what I need most from you. Just help them. Help. Some people have a lot to say, and it's very easy. You don't necessarily need to add, but some people don't have much to say, and it's often helpful to help deepen the conversation by learning how to do that.
And are these shears typically the spouse complaining about the other spouse, meaning sharing about the other spouse, or are they sharing about what happened in the grocery store?
Well, it can really be anything, but most couples who are coming for couples therapy usually have problems they want to talk about. Um, what we do make it clear is, it's not about blaming or shaming the other person. So we want to quickly, like, make sure that they're using I statements, make sure that they're not just blaming and criticizing the other person. So when you came home late from work last night, how I felt was such, such and such. And the story I tell myself is that you don't care about me, but it's more about me than about what you did. So, yes, you may have done something. You are the offending party, did the trigger, the topic, but really what it's all about is about my experience about that. And when a person shares their feelings about something, you can't really argue because that's your feelings about it. And
Mhm.
we're not talking about objective reality is talking about more of the subjective experience. So we help people guide them through that. And again, they will talk about some very difficult things. Now, depending on the couple, we have to know when it's safe to go there. And maybe this couple that's highly reactive, we can't just start off going to an issue that's a 10 out of 10. Maybe we need to talk about something about, you know, leaving the socks on the floor before we can get to something deeper. Maybe we need to talk about, a special moment I remember having with you, talking about the past, something positive or an appreciation. So there's many different strategies of how to help a couple and to deal with it. But for sure, we are dealing with the real life challenges that they become part of the content in the relationship, in the dialogue.
Okay, tell us more. Is there
And
is there
then
more to it?
there is some more. So then, after we help them deepen it, and after we have the receiver. When there is no more, we have them summarize it, and that's really powerful because when a person's listening to you and they're mirroring you and they're asking you, is there more? And then after all of that, they can summarize everything you've said, and it's not just because they have a good memory. It shows I'm really listening to you. What you're saying is important to me.
There's another person here besides me, and it's you.
Right. Exactly. You're the focus. And then after they check to see if the summary is good, and if there's more they want to add, sometimes more comes up. And then we validate what you're saying makes sense and you make sense, validating that your thoughts and feelings are equally as valid as mine. I don't Whether I agree or not doesn't matter. It's your world, it's your experience. I wouldn't say it's your world. In your world, it makes sense. I would just say, well, you're saying makes sense and you make sense, or even like the part that makes sense is that you said I come home late and it gets you really angry. Um, Even mirroring back kind of the part that makes sense. And then finally empathizing how I imagine that might make you feel. And sharing two emotions. I imagine that you're feeling really sad and scared, and then checking, is that what you're feeling, and then is there more? And then finally, I mean, there are different ways of doing it, but usually after that, I would say, and what this reminds me of from my childhood,
Hmm.
and I would have the person who's sharing, just take a moment to sit with that, to see, is there something that's familiar about this from childhood? And undoubtedly, there's going to be something that comes up that, whether the content might be different, but the emotional experience is the same or very similar. And that becomes a very powerful moment when they can come in, when they can be aware of that connection, and also for their spouse to have compassion, and also to realize that this is really not very much about me at all. Even though you're complaining that I come home late from work, and maybe I do, and I can work on that, but it's more about your emotional experience and how this really hurts for you. And I can really feel that and
Mhm.
empathize.
Beautiful. It's really about you waiting for your father who wouldn't come home from shul because he stayed late talking to everybody and you were starving.
Right. That's an example.
Okay. I know I had offered in the email that Shlomo said that if anybody has a difficult or challenging case that they're working with and would like to share it, that he would sort of give a little bit of a peek as to how it might look using Imago Therapy. So if you do, please raise your hand by clicking the React tab on the bottom of the screen. Shlomo, you also said you had a demo for us that you would show.
Yeah.
This is
How are we doing on time? How are we doing on time? It's about 10 minutes. I don't know if that's
that sounds a little long, but maybe we could cut it down or stop in the middle or we'll put it on
Okay.
1.5 speed.
Okay, let me see here.
That's cheating.
Then you won't see this
I would put
how
my
slow it is.
whole day on 1.5 speed besides when I sleep. I put that on 0.5. I
Okay,
can make it longer.
yeah, let me see here. I'm just clicking on the screen. Let me just share it, and then we have, how many minutes do you want to share?
I think 5 or 6 should be more than enough.
I can fast forward part of it. And as we think
And
about
can
something that
you
you're,
enlarge it so that it covers the whole screen?
sorry,
Yeah, you don't have to.
during this time, it could be just a general characteristic that
I appreciate in the last few weeks is all the progress we've been making around the house to get things done and things out of the way and ordering things to, things that we've been trying to get ordered to maybe organize things in the house and all the different projects that we've had. I've appreciated you making an effort to do that, to do those projects, to get those projects done. So thank you.
Yeah.
will mirror that back. I heard you say.
I hear you. Yeah, I heard you say that you appreciated that we've over the last few weeks have made a lot of efforts to work on the house, and you've appreciated my efforts in that process.
That's
Did I get you? Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I appreciate that, Laura, so if you can share the reason I appreciate that.
The reason I appreciate that is because I know that you know how much disorganization and things being out of place really makes me uncomfortable. And also the space that we have in our house has been pretty full. I think with the anticipation that we would have more space. And since we are not having more space anytime soon, if at all, I think we kind of shifted to getting rid of things, sort of trying to sort through things we don't need. And it makes me feel much calmer when things are organized. I don't have to feel kind of a sense of anxiety that I get when things are out of order.
Yeah. So I hear you say that I'm aware that it's an issue for you when things aren't organized, when things are cluttered, and that since we've shifted a little bit to addressing that, addressing the amount of space we have, that you appreciated my making that shift toward sort of managing the clutter, because I think we did expect to have more space with kids being at school or not living at home, that we've had to deal with there being not as much space as we thought.
Right.
Did I get that?
Yes, you got that.
Anything else?
The only other thing is just the piece about having more spaces. I still have a wish and a desire for like a sunroom or a porch or something,
I'm going
or
to
a
try to
new
fast
deck.
forward it to.
And that would help too, because it would display the new space, because
One second,
that's a long story. But in part because of the way the house is set up. But I think it's also deeper than that, but it's partly because, you know, we don't really have a family room. We have like the living room. I'm in the living room.
1 second.
And so huge difference in sort of like my sense of calm. But I also have kind of gotten to the point where I'm okay with kind of figuring out how to deal with what we have at the moment.
Okay. So I hear you say that it would make a difference to have another room, to have the.
There's just one point where she talks about where it's very interesting. 1 second. I don't remember exactly the timestamp. That's why I usually see.
I want a big house. It's also a lot of other issues around being in this house.
She says something about
And I love this house.
other issues about being in this
the same
house,
issues that I had as a child are the issues we have now, pretty much, with all the family in one small area, same configuration. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the gist.
All right, I'll try to mirror that back. The reason why it's important to you is a reason that you sort of that you've had from before, when you lived in the house before with your family, and it was, you know, it was the house wasn't a big house and everybody was kind of.
So she lived in this house that she's living in now as her childhood home, but I want to get to where
idea
I asked her about this.
it may not change a lot.
Just put it on 1.5 speed, baby. And
Yes.
we'll watch.
I have
What did you
that.
say?
Put it on 1.5 speed and we can watch till the end.
Yeah, okay.
If that's okay with you.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Yep. Thank you.
Is there more about that? Just ask Mark if you can ask, is there more to Dolores, see if there's more?
Is there more?
That's it for
Or
now.
you want to share? Just take a moment, Doris, just to see if there's any more that you wanted to share about this, my desire for peace, and maybe how in this very space I had maybe had a challenge experiencing peace as a child.
I didn't know about that, but
yes, that's correct. In this space, it was very hard to have peace, and I spent a lot of time away from home once I could. So once I got older, old enough to leave home, 13, 14, go spend time at friends, that's where I was, because it was just it was, me even remembering it now, it was very stressful being here at that part of my, that age, at 13 through 20, it was very difficult. So.
I hear you saying that being here when you were younger was very stressful. And when you could leave, like around 13, that's why you were out of the house a lot, because it was too stressful to be in the house.
That's right.
Did I get that?
Yes, you got that.
Is there anything else?
No, I think that's most of I think that's most of that particular situation for now. I could elaborate on other pieces of it.
Okay, so that's enough for now. But you see that was just that was an appreciation that I have in the beginning of a session. You know, sometimes it can be, you know, nothing too special, but this wound up being something very deep. That not only is it remind her is the same space, but she wasn't used to having that peace in this house, and it was a sore spot for her. So being able to have that with him and was very reparative.
Yeah, and you're really facilitating it forces the facilitation of a DMC, deep meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
They have to really stay present. You know, the questions that they're prompted to ask force them to stay present through the steps of you know, they're sort of climbing the steps of the process backwards, right? She's saying what her experience is today, but then it's bringing her into a deeper place and a deeper place and making more more sense of it, in which he can feel for that, have more empathy towards
Right.
it, because he's understanding that this isn't just a bark, that she's barking at him.
Right.
It's way more complex and beautiful, and it brings him to a much closer place. Okay, any questions or comments or case questions? How do you get buy-in? Like, I find that a lot of times clients are like, no, I have to say it as it is, and I have to tell them what's right. And how do you get buy-in to this?
So sometimes for some couples, they need a little bit more psychoed. Like, ideally, I like to just kind of, I would say, throw them in the process, have them experience the magic. But a lot of times, couples, they need a little bit of psychoed about it. Some couples that are like really difficult, I would just say, like, how's it working for you? How's it working for you now, the way you're doing it? So humor me, and we're gonna try something different. If you don't want to come back ever again, you don't have to. Just humor me for the next hour and a half, and let's try to
Mhm.
be open to something that might be different.
Okay, fair enough. Some clients are just like, you see what he does, you see what she does, you
Yeah.
see. They want it almost like the tattletale.
Yeah, I mean, you see that they're facing each other
Mhm.
instead of facing me. So that starts it off. That sets up the dynamic where, you're going to be talking to each other today. You're not talking to me about each other,
Mhm.
and it's going to be a very structured process. So, the therapist, the facilitator asserts the role in a gentle way, of course, right away from the beginning.
Mhm. Okay, let's take a question from Parol. Go ahead, Parol.
No, it's not actually a question, it's a comment. In support, I'm sure you don't need my plumba, but I was working with a couple who were highly dysregulated at each other's throats, and we did this mirroring exercise, and it was literally magic. They were really, for the first time, they both felt heard and understood and seen. And it turned out that at the bottom, they both really had that same, it was almost an identical experience that they were having, and just having even that in common was amazing. So yeah, it's really a beautiful model.
And oftentimes the thing that's in common is that they both want to be heard. Like, I find that the conclusion is that they both want to be heard. And because, there's two ways that you can get heard. You can either scream louder, but then it causes the other person to scream louder because they also want to be heard, or you can ask to be heard. And if couples could learn to ask to be heard instead of screaming louder, a lot more would probably get done.
Right. Or they shut down. I run a DBT group, and one of the women was discussing whether maybe if she would shut down for longer periods of time, it would be more effective. And I was like, we were all like looking at her like, really? Do you think that's going to work? But yeah, but with this couple, not only they both wanted to be heard, but whatever their kind of taina was, and I don't remember what it was identical for both of them. So it was really very eye-opening.
Shlomo, before I forget, can you share any resources? Are you doing any trainings in Imago? I understand you're an Imago trainer. What's anything coming up? Anything in the pipeline that people can know about?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on the faculty of the Imago IITI, Imago International Training Institute. So I'm doing starting a new cohort for this coming year. We just finished our last year's training. We had a great class. And we're having basically the way it works, it's a 12-day training. It's usually 3 modules. The way I do it is I do like a Sunday, Monday virtually. But because it's a lot to commit to up front, I offer the first 2 days. So you can just take the first 2 days standalone. And a lot of therapists who've done that, they've learned the dialogue and they've been able to practice it with their clients, even if they didn't do the full training. So we have one coming up July 27th and 28th online. We have a few other dates, one in November.
Where would someone find it? I put it in the chat bar.
So it's the marriage, I should give you the exact link. It's the marriagerestorationproject.com, but I can give you the actual, just get you the URL to the training page. That's
The
probably,
Marriage Restoration
yeah, 1 second.
Project.
Yeah, let me give you I'm going to copy it for you. 1 sec. Yeah, because it's a little bit long with all the, here we go. I'll put it in the box here. Here it is. It's
What's-
Imago Marriage Restoration Project, Imago-training-courses. And yeah, so you have opportunity. You just want to take the first 2 days, you can do that and experience it, and it's quite helpful. We have a lot of, it's not just like you don't have to like listen to me. It's a lecture for 2 days. It's there's some lecture, there's theory, there's a lot of practice, there's demos. We actually have the clinicians in the group practice doing the dialogue with their fellow clinicians, following the script, and there's feedback. It's very, very helpful.
Great. Cool.
And you
Okay.
get CEUs too.
You have to see what CUs.
CEUs, yeah.
Okay, Shlomo, send me the information via email and I'll blast it out when we send out the recording. And I do want to encourage everyone who's here tonight to also watch our first conversation that we had a couple of years ago on the Mondays with Maishi YouTube channel. Take a look, check out. If you Google Shlomo Slatkin, I think it'll come up in your Google search. If you Google Mondays with Maishi Shlomo Slatkin, it'll certainly come up. And if you go on YouTube, you'll find it there too. So do watch it because it was very, very interesting and insightful. Insightful with an S, that is. Okay, Israel Elliott, go ahead. Now with a C.
Thank you very much. So I'm listening to the process, and actually I did Imago a while back. I guess my question is it seems that you as the therapist have certain lines. I mean, certain things, can you tell me more? I guess that my question is how do you keep the therapy exciting for yourself? In other words, part of the therapy is that you yourself have to be involved. And if you're always saying the same lines again and again, I would imagine it could become boring.
So wondering if it's boring. Couples aren't boring. Couples, you have to get high conflict couples there, It's not, you don't always have these like really well-behaved couples that are just going to follow the script. You're going to have people that are going to get reactive, and you have to stop them and regulate them and coach one person. And so it's not just like kind of like a robot and everything goes exactly as planned.
All right.
Maybe you're lucky if that's the case, but that's my experience.
Okay, Racheli, did you want to ask something? You just unmuted or?
Yeah, I did want to ask something. Thanks so much. The beginning, where you had that script it was like that interaction with that husband and wife, and the man was recounting a lot of his childhood. Was the idea like just to help him connect his patterns to the past? I joined then, actually. I joined a few minutes late, and it sounds like
Oprah clip.
What?
She's talking about the Oprah clip.
Oprah clips, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was called the parent-child dialogue. So that was an opportunity for him to become aware of the challenges from childhood, and also be aware of maybe how that's impacting him today, how he might be projecting some of those onto his spouse, and also for his wife to understand that some of the issues that they're having goes back to something deeper. And being able to do it, like, it's one thing to intellectualize it or write it down on a piece of paper, but to actually like role play it and really feel that, it helps remove that projection and helps them really be able to have a real relationship with each other instead of their mother or father substitute.
Yeah. So I guess they enter into a place of real deep understanding of that pattern and how to just empathize with that.
Yeah, because it's experiential, so it helps them get to a deeper place than just having it up here.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Everybody for joining.